Well, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens take down Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs to advance to their third Super Bowl in franchise history. Let's talk about that and so much more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, coming to you from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here and making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes over in video form on YouTube and audio form wherever you get your shows. Be sure to subscribe, follow along the whole 9 yards. You can like this video on YouTube. It helps out the algorithm a ton. In audio form and video form as well. Tell a friend, tell a family member. It really helps out. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. 5 days a week here on Locked On Ravens, plus bonus content. We'll have episodes continuing to come out over the course of the week. So Ravens news, analysis, updates, and more, plus some weekend bonus episodes. I'll do another pregame episode on Sunday to get everybody fired up for the game and the growth we've had, the support that I keep getting here. It really means so much to me, both in video form and in audio form. Tell a friend, tell a family member. The word of mouth still helps out a ton here on Locked On Ravens. Today, we're going to be diving into another crossover Thursday. We'll get the Chiefs' perspective on some things here, and I'll provide my Ravens analysis too, of course. Chris Clark of Locked On Chiefs will be joining us, and there was a lot to talk about, so without any further ado, let's get into our conversation now. Chris, this is exciting for both sides here. The Ravens hosting their first championship game, the AFC Championship game in their franchise history. Patrick Mahomes knows a thing or two about AFC Championship games, though. He's been to quite a few of them in a row, as the storyline is. So two different sides of that coin, but two teams here that I think are peaking for the most part at the right time. Baltimore clicking on all cylinders, and Kansas City finding gritty ways to win in a tough game against Buffalo and obviously against Miami getting the job done too. Going to be a really good game in all honesty, and these two teams haven't played each other since 2021, where the Ravens won that game in Baltimore, but very much so familiarity between both sides is over the first 4 years of Lamar Jackson's career in the NFL. Kansas City, all 4 years there, the Ravens are 1-3 against Lamar Jackson or against Patrick Mahomes, and on the other side of that, you have Patrick Mahomes being 3-1 against Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, and that's going to be a storyline. If you watch the news reports today, both of the guys talked very deferentially about the other. They have a lot of respect between the two of them, and Lamar even came out and said he doesn't want to play against Mahomes. So funny enough in that regard, you look at this and you're right. The Chiefs have played in the AFC Championship game. This will be their sixth straight. The first 5 were at home. This is going to be in Baltimore. It's going to be a little bit of a different environment for Kansas City. But I think when you step back and you look at it, I think you have to be excited as a Chiefs fan looking at this game and knowing that they made it back to the AFC Championship after watching how this team struggled the second half of the season and really all season long with different things on offense.
Yeah, and I think both teams are coming in with momentum. Obviously, when you win 2 playoff games as your Kansas City, that's momentum. Baltimore, I think, and both sides, honestly, there were narratives going into the divisional round for each of these teams. Mahomes, you mentioned it, first road playoff game in Buffalo. Is he going to be able, the whole different environment as he talked about? He obviously won that game there. Now it's his second. For Lamar in the divisional round, it was, can he win another playoff game? Can the Ravens kind of get rid of those 2019 playoff demons? And both teams passed essentially with flying colors, because you win the game, you pass. That's how the playoffs work. Doesn't matter how you do it. So moving into the storylines for this game, Chris, I think for me, starting with Baltimore has to be the injury situation. The Ravens had that bye week going into the divisional round. It really helped them out a lot. They've been banged up throughout the season, but it's been a different type of banged up, where over the past really 3 or 4 seasons, it's been they've lost guys to season-ending injury after season-ending injury. But this year has been a bit of a different tune, where they've lost guys for maybe a month or 3 weeks, and then they come back. And so for players, for example, like Ronnie Stanley, who's been banged up for most of the season, Adafe always had the bye week, was very beneficial for him. You look at Baltimore's injury report on Wednesday here. Mark Andrews, who has been designated to return from injured reserve, he practiced in full the last 2 days of the week last week, but didn't end up playing against Houston. He practiced in full again to start the week this week, and I anticipate he plays in this one. The reports are he's expected to be back, which is a big boost to the Ravens offense. Even though Isaiah Likely, who's filled in for Mark Andrews, has been a really good tight end for him. The connection that Mark and Lamar have is you can't recreate that. So that's going to be big for him. But the one player to watch is Marlon Humphrey. He's been out for these past couple of weeks, did not play in the Houston game, didn't practice all week before the Houston game. He returned to practice on Wednesday with a calf injury. He was limited, so obviously monitoring that throughout the rest of the week. Baltimore's secondary has survived and played well without him. Players like Brandon Stevens, Ronald Darby, Arthur Millette stepping up in that corner room, but Humphrey is still their best corner. Other than that, the only other players who didn't practice are Tylan Wallace and then Kevin Zeitler. Zeitler was a rest day, although he was dealing with a knee injury throughout Saturday's game against Houston. But the Ravens, other than that, are a very healthy team, all things considered, heading into this AFC Championship game. But I know, Chris, on the other side, Kansas City's dealing with some injuries. And when I say some, I mean quite a few.
Yeah, you flip it over, and what do they have? 15 to 16 some injuries on there. Derek Notty's not going to play in this game. I think he tore his tricep a couple weeks ago. They're not going to put him on IR unless there's a possibility that he can come back. He has a possibility to come back for the Super Bowl if they make it that far. Sky Moore is coming back from IR. He tweaked his knee, so it's going to be questionable whether or not he's even able to be activated to go. And then you look at Trey Smith illness. That's not really a big deal. Mike Edwards concussion. That's expected. When you get a concussion on Sunday, he's not going to practice on Tuesday or on Wednesday. I would expect that we will see a change, hopefully, for him throughout the end of the week, and I think that he could end up playing. Although, if you watched Kansas City's injury report, Wanya Morris got hurt and had a concussion and missed a couple of games. So it's also possible that maybe he isn't back. Every player is different when it comes to that. Pacheco looks like he's going to play. Joe Thuney is the really big one on this list. A strained pectoral, while it's not torn, it is strained, and that does mean that there's going to be, some muscle fiber torn. It's going to be painful to play through if he tries to play, but he is one of the toughest guys in the locker room, and he is a guy that has been known to be an Iron Man at that position. So it would not shock me to have him play, but it would be maybe mildly surprising if he does. To me, in this instance, I think they'd be much better served starting Allegretti, let him sit. If they lose the game, they lose the game. If they win the game, then you have Thuney probably back and almost healthy for the Super Bowl. And then Willie Gay, Blaine Gabbert, and L'Jarius Sneed. Willie Gay's been dealing with a neck injury for a while. L'Jarius Sneed's been dealing with his knee all season. So, I guess it's his calf. Oblique for Blaine Gabbert, I guess that's a little concerning, but you're hoping Gabbert doesn't play. So, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, it's not great if you have to go to, your backup to Blaine Gabbert in that situation. That would not be good for Kansas City, but I would expect he'll be okay to go. Otherwise, there's still a lot of people. I think there's 8 players on full practice that have some sort of injury. All of them are going to play. I expect at this point that you're going to see Willie Gay and L'Jarius Sneed play. Pacheco's likely to play. Trey Smith will play because of illness. But, it's a long list, but I would say that they're going to have a lot of these guys available to go on Sunday.
Yeah, at this point in the season, Chris, no one's 100% healthy. Everybody's banged up in some way, shape, or form. So you see some of those guys on the injury report, practicing in full. They have to put them on there because of protocol.
Right, but the big thing that stands out to me is Kelsey has been on the injury report multiple times this season. He is not on the injury report. That's a great sign for him going forward. Wanya Morris is back from the concussion, was a full participant in practice, so he will at least be available. Whether or not he actually plays is a whole other question because Donovan Smith has been playing pretty well at left tackle. But having him as a backup, especially with Allegretti having to potentially start, Wanya Morris could be your 6th offensive lineman. Maybe he's the next guy up in that offensive line room if somebody else was to go down.
Yeah, and speaking of that offensive line, you mentioned Joe Thuney. That is the massive one when you're talking with Kansas City right now. But you mentioned Nick Allegretti, who you said would fill in for Joe Thuney if he's unable to play. We know how good Thuney is. There is going to be a drop-off there, right? If Thuney is not in there, there's going to be a drop-off. But for maybe Ravens fans who don't know, how much of a drop-off is that? Is Allegretti considered, in your eyes, one of the better backups in the league? Is it a huge drop-off? He's not that good.
I would think he's one of the better backups. The problem is you're taking a guy that's basically been an all-pro his whole career and removing him. So it's really hard to compare to a guy like Thuney, who's been fantastic for the Chiefs all season long. So to me, I mean, it's a downgrade. It's obviously a downgrade. Is it going to be something that could get the Chiefs beat? Yeah, I mean, possibly. The biggest concern that you have in that situation is that Donovan Smith and Creed Humphrey don't have a lot of experience and a lot of chemistry with Allegretti in that position. That's your biggest concern. Allegretti as a player, he's been with the Chiefs for a very long time. He used to be a starter for him, and now he's their sixth offensive lineman. And he comes in whenever they go to a heavy set, and he's the next man up in any of the interior three if those guys go down. So to me, it's a concern, especially going up against the Baltimore Ravens and their fantastic defense. But I don't know that you could really ask for, outside of having a previous Pro Bowl type player that's at the twilight of the career, having somebody like Allegretti come in. I think that you have to feel pretty confident that he can at least get the job done. He was able to against Buffalo, and he actually was the guy that got Pacheco, or cleared the hole for Pacheco at the very end of the game to help them seal the victory.
And for Baltimore, they've been kind of talking about some offensive lineman situation stuff, load management with Ronnie Stanley and Morgan Moses throughout games. They've run a rotation, especially in the later part of the season, where Ronnie Stanley and Morgan Moses will start the game. And then maybe the second or third drive, Patrick McCary will come in the game for Ronnie Stanley. And then Morgan Moses will get replaced by Daniel Falele. And they'll rotate these guys in and out through the entire course of the game. And it has helped Ronnie Stanley with some of his injury things, just being fresh and staying fresh. So when you're talking about how the Ravens have been able to stay healthy, I think they've taken a different injury approach. You look at the injury report now, the bye helped. But some of the things they're doing, it's a little unconventional, but it's been working for them. And that leads us into our second segment, talking about some of the biggest matchups for both the Chiefs and the Ravens as they prepare for the AFC Championship game in Baltimore. We still have a lot to talk about here on both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Chiefs. Don't go anywhere. AFC Championship, more coverage of that coming up soon. First, this episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. And passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts, or your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Also, ends only exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. We're back. Our second segment, Locked On Ravens and Locked On Chiefs. Kevin Ostraker of Locked On Ravens, still here with Chris Clark of Locked On Chiefs. And Chris, I started off the first segment. I want to throw the second segment to you here at the start. Biggest matchups of this game. Where are you most intrigued when you look at both of these teams and where they could match up with each other?
I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to say the Chiefs linebackers, and really the defensive line to an extent, against the Baltimore Ravens running backs. And I say that because the reality of last week's game against the Bills is that they ran the ball on the Chiefs, and they kept running the ball on the Chiefs. The Ravens are a running team. I'm not saying they can't throw the ball. Obviously, they can. I'm just saying that is what they want to do. They want to be able to impose their will. They want to be able to run the ball. And that's a huge thing. If Kansas City can't stop the run, that is going to be one of the biggest things that is going to lead to a potential loss in this one. I think that when you start looking at the linebackers, does Nick Bolton have another good game? Does, Drew Tranquil, where is he going to rotate into this? How's Willie Gay going to play? Leo Chenal, and I know they're a 4-3 defense, but Leo Chenal has been a guy that's been a starter. Tranquil's been a guy that's come off the bench. They're really using 4 linebackers in that rotation to attack different things. And when you start looking at the game plan, then you get into, okay, when the Ravens pass, it's, okay, who are you spying on Lamar Jackson? Because if you don't spy, you're going to be in trouble. I would expect that's going to be Willie Gay. But it's about stopping the Baltimore running game. If you make Lamar Jackson have to beat you by throwing, you're in a much better position, I think, that you are if you allow them to run the ball and stop the pass. Kansas City's defense is built to stop the pass. They could struggle against the run. Yeah,
Lamar can do it with his arm and with his legs. And we saw Houston, when they didn't spy him, it's about advantage, and Lamar was taking advantage of what was given to him on the field for most of the game. The end of that first half against Houston was a little iffy, but when Houston didn't spy him, they dropped, their linebackers back into coverage. He had that free lane. He took that free lane. But then in the second half, the adjustments that they made, Lamar was taking the checkdowns, taking the short stuff. It made some really good throws. So, I've been so impressed the whole year with Lamar and how he has grown as a player and how he's seeing the field. And I think it's great because you're in such a bind if you're a defense for Lamar, because he can beat you with his arm, with his legs. You got to pick one, and then you have to just hope the other one doesn't come to life. So it's been a joy to watch for me, and just seeing him doing that in Baltimore. But for me, speaking of pass catchers, the Ravens are giving Lamar pass catchers, but it's been a big point of contention for Kansas City this year. Rashee Rice has been awesome. He's one of my favorite receivers in this league, if we're being honest here, although I can't really say that this week, can I? But still, really good receiver for Kansas City. And Travis Kelce is still Travis Kelce, even though, maybe it's not the up to standard Travis Kelce we've seen over the course of his career. We saw in Buffalo, he can still make plays. He can still score key touchdowns. But other than that, who's going to step up if you're the Chiefs? Justin Watson had a big drop early in that Buffalo game. Kadarius Toney, I think he's on track to play, if I'm not mistaken, right, Chris? But is he even going to make an impact? To me, that versus Baltimore's secondary, where maybe you get Marlon Humphrey back, you have Brandon Stevens and Ronald Darby and Kyle Hamilton and Arthur Millette and Marcus Williams and Geno. The list goes on and on and on. It just feels like you take out both top guys for each team, and the Ravens secondary, to me at least, overpowers those other Chiefs pass catchers.
I don't know that I would necessarily disagree with what you just said. What I would argue is that while that may be true, Patrick Mahomes has shown that he is still willing to go to his guys regardless. And sure, yeah, he played an almost flawless game against the Buffalo Bills. So to me, it's going to be a question of, okay, is he still going to give the guys the chance? He showed last week, and especially if you're watching the second half going up against the Bills, a guy that struggled all season long with drops and with not being in the right place at the right time and not being on the same page on deep balls. Patrick Mahomes threw a ball to Marquez Valdes-Scantling that I don't know how you would defend it. It was a perfect throw. MBS made the catch, and that was a ball that normally you would expect that it would be a drop, but he caught it, and he made a big play. He made another big play later in the game. If the Chiefs are going to win this one, it's going to be a situation where he's going to have to be somebody that takes advantage of, whoever he's going up against. Mahomes has to trust him. Same with Justin Watson. You're absolutely right. Watson had a huge drop early in that game. They should have been in a situation where they're going for a touchdown. Instead, he dropped a 3rd and 5 that was right in his chest. It hit him in the chest, and he dropped it. So that's the big question is, who is going to step up is a great question. Kadarius Toney does look like he could be on track to play. That would be a potential game changer for the Chiefs, although he struggled this season. And some of the times when he's struggled, he's popped the ball up, and that is absolutely something you can't do against this Ravens team.
And I think when it comes to turnovers too, Chris, the Ravens have been a top 5 defense in terms of forcing turnovers this year, at least in the regular season. According to turnover percentage, the Chiefs, they're 25th in turnover percentage. Doesn't mean they can't generate turnovers. They've done it this season. But to me, a game like this could come down to a turnover here or who has the last turnover in a game. And the Ravens have been very good at doing that. But another area where I'm also looking at is I'm big on the trenches, both sides, offensively and defensively. And you look at what the Ravens pass rush was able to do to the Houston offensive line last week. And again, Kansas City's offensive line is not Houston's offensive line, right? You go to a whole different matchup. But the Ravens just physically overpowered Houston's offensive line, and they've overpowered a lot of offensive lines this year. So a key matchup and a big matchup to me is, can Baltimore get pressure on Patrick Mahomes early? And we know Mahomes can roll out. We've seen the highlight tapes. We've seen the big plays. He can roll out and make plays. There's no question about it. But can you make Patrick Mahomes uncomfortable? He's seen everything. So, there's a level to it. But if you just let him sit in there, stand in the pocket, he's going to dice you up. You have to be able to at least let him roll out and give you the chance that maybe he'll throw a ball and a receiver won't work back to him. And maybe you can get quick pressure on him. If you blitz Mahomes, it can be a recipe for disaster sometimes, right? Yeah.
That's a problem.
Have to be able to get pressure with 4, something the Ravens have not been able to do in recent years. But this year in particular, they've done a really good job, because when they win super fast. So you can drop your guys into coverage. And look, if there's a quarterback you don't want to blitz, I think 2 at the top of the list right now are Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, and when you look at what Patrick Mahomes has done in the playoffs, and something specific he said a couple of weeks ago in one of the press conferences is, or I think it was after the game, he has gotten to the point now where he's learned that he can just take what the defense is giving him or throw the ball away. That is okay to throw the ball away because it gives you another down. Don't force something. And if he is going to play that way, he hasn't had a turnover, I don't think. I know he hasn't had a turnover this season in the playoffs. He doesn't throw many interceptions when it comes to playoff football. So that's something to watch going into this game. But the other side of it is if you're Kansas City, stay ahead of the sticks. And that doesn't necessarily just mean Patrick Mahomes. It means Andy Reid needs to be calling the right plays to get them and to stay ahead of the sticks. One of the things that drove me nuts against the Bills was Pacheco was having his way with that team. And then on 1st and goal, you run basically a speed option to McCole Hardman, and he fumbles the ball out of bounds. That would have been a 2-score game at that point. It would have put the game almost out of reach for Buffalo. It completely changes the complexion of the game, but you got out of what you had been successful doing on offense. And I know Pacheco just had a big run. I don't know that he was in the game at that point, but you still don't go to that type of scenario. Don't get cute when everything has been working. That's a big Andy Reid thing that he's got to get figured out for this week.
Yeah, and I think coaching is another key matchup too. John Harbaugh versus Andy Reid. We know the relationship those two have, very well documented between those two. So I'm excited for this game. I think it's going to be electric. And coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about some predictions we have as well as what each team needs to do to win the game. So be sure to stay tuned here on this episode of both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Chiefs. Plenty to get to on the show. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. In the NFL regular season, it's all wrapped up. We're in the AFC Championship game, playoffs in full swing right now, but there's still plenty of time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Brand new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when they place a $5 bet. There's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. And the app is super easy to use. There are so many different ways to bet as well, like live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explorer tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, those way to find popular parlays, and so much more. So, you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet a layup, whether that bet includes maybe anytime touchdown parlay. Maybe you want to do Chiefs Ravens AFC Championship. You can do Isaiah Pacheco anytime touchdown if he plays. Zay Flowers anytime touchdown. Those two looking like pretty good bets right now. So again, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make that first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. We're back. Final segment here about Locked On Ravens and Locked On Chiefs with Chris Clark of Locked On Chiefs. I'm Kevin Ostreicher of Locked On Ravens. I want to thank everybody again for tuning in today, making both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Chiefs your first listen each and every day. Be sure to subscribe to us in video form, wherever you get your shows, in audio form as well, wherever you get your shows. And Chris, this game to me, it might come down to one or two plays. Both teams, I think, have advantages over the other, but the Ravens right now, I think, are the hottest team in football, but that does not mean Kansas City cannot come into Baltimore on Sunday and play spoiler. As we've seen with Patrick Mahomes, he can win. We've seen him win. He's a two-time champion, and what Lamar Jackson said on Wednesday, I got to go through the champs to be the champs. That's what Baltimore's aiming to do on Sunday, but Kansas City will have something to say about that. When you look at what the Chiefs have to do to win the game, if you're putting out a blueprint, a game plan for Kansas City, how do you think they approach it?
I think if you're putting out a blueprint for Kansas City, it's two things, really. It's find a way to stop the run against the Ravens, make Lamar pass. And I'm not saying you can't beat him with the pass, but if you make it more one-dimensional, I think it helps the Chiefs. And they have a fantastic pass defense, so I think that's going to help them. But number two, it's the one that it's been all season long. Win the turnover battle. They are still playing in the AFC Championship game after going negative in the turnover battle the entire season. I think they're the only team that made the playoffs that had a negative turnover ratio. And you're sitting there talking about it's -10. It's not even like -1 or 2. It's -10. So it's a legitimate bad turnover margin, and they have to win that. If they win that and they're able to slow down the run, I'm not saying stop, but slow down the run of the Baltimore Ravens, I think that's how they win this game.
And to your point, I think it's the exact opposite for the Ravens, where you don't let Kansas City force those turnovers. You protect the ball. Yep. And when this Ravens team doesn't make mistakes, when they don't turn the ball over, they are very, very hard to beat. Now, I'm not going to say it's impossible because, again, anything can happen. We're in the NFL playoffs, so of course anything can. But we saw early in the season when Baltimore lost both to the Colts and the Steelers, it was because of self-inflicted mistakes. Now, it's not the only reason they lost, but week 3, there were multiple miscommunication issues that put that game away for them. And if they just had one less issue, they win that game. For the Steelers game, they had 7 drops in that game. Self-inflicted mistakes and self-inflicted wounds did them in. Now, for me,
sounds familiar.
Yeah, right. Every team goes through it, but when it's your team, it's just so much more amplified. Like, you're like, come on. And that's where some of the frustration came in, because I think a lot of people here in Baltimore knew this team could be so great and be where they are now. It just took a while to get there for them. But I think also, if you can stop, it's almost like what you were talking about with making the Ravens one-dimensional. If the Ravens can make the Chiefs one-dimensional, maybe stop Isaiah Pacheco early. The Ravens' run defense, it was iffy in the regular season. Now, the stats are a little more skewed because Baltimore had a couple of really, really bad rush defense games where they gave up, I think, 170 plus to Cleveland. They rounded out the year with 2 straight 150 plus games back-to-back they gave up. But against Houston, that defense was flying to the ball, ripping offensive linemen off of them. And the Ravens, both, again, offensively and defensively, credit to them, had almost 200 more rushing yards than Houston. So if you can stop Isaiah Pacheco and make Patrick Mahomes and that passing offense beat you, not that it can't, because we've seen it. We've seen Mahomes make plays. We've seen Mahomes beat teams, and we know the greatness of what Mahomes is. But if you can take away an element of the Chiefs offense, it will just allow you to simplify things and not have to worry on early downs about Isaiah Pacheco. If you put the Chiefs in second and long situations, it's a whole heck of a lot better than putting them in second and short situations if you're the Ravens. So it's such a different play call for either side if you're talking about second and long versus second and short. But on also defensively for the Ravens, their MO all season has been, you can take some of that short stuff. You were talking about it earlier. Chris Mahomes will take some of that and then he'll make stuff happen with it. You can take that. You can take the intermediate stuff against the Ravens too, but they're not going to let you beat them deep with whether it's too high looks or they have Marcus Williams or Geno Stone as a free roamer in there. But once you get into the red zone, their philosophy is if you can limit the opposing offense to a kick every possession, so a field goal or a punt, the Ravens feel very confident in their offense and Lamar Jackson that they can win a game that way, especially with how good this defense is playing. So mistake-free football for the Ravens. I think also, I'll steal one from you, win the turnover battle. That's part of it. Baltimore, I think if they did that, that's the blueprint you want to have for sure. Well, let's get into some predictions here, Chris. The Chiefs can come into Baltimore and play spoiler. The Ravens, they obviously can take care of business at home. It could go either way. Do you think Baltimore makes it to the Super Bowl, or do you think it's Kansas City who's making it to the big dance?
If you would have asked me 7 weeks ago, who I thought was going to make the Super Bowl, I would have told you the Ravens, and I wouldn't have thought the Chiefs were going to make it to the AFC Championship game. Watching them play the last 2 weeks, and yes, I know the competition level isn't the same as playing the Ravens, but watching them play and watching what Mahomes is doing and in what he is doing differently than he did when they were losing games, and watching them run the ball more, and continuing to watch the defense play phenomenal football. I mean, when you look at what they did against the Bills, they only allowed 7 second-half points against Buffalo Bills. Bills put up 17, and they only allowed 7 more the rest of the game. That's the type of performance that can get you into the Super Bowl, and you can lean on your defense to do that. So the real question is Baltimore going to score more than 24? That really has been about what Kansas City has allowed most of the season. At most is 24 points. I think they allowed 27 once against the Packers. And can the offense get 24 points? If you start looking at efficiency, the bigger thing and the bigger question to me is when you look at the Buffalo game, Buffalo held the ball 37 minutes. If that happens against the Ravens, the Kansas City is going to be struggling, because that means they're getting run on again and run on consistently, and it's long sustained drives. Mahomes and company were able to score quickly against the Buffalo Bills. It's going to be much harder to do that against the Ravens. But at this point, it's Patrick Mahomes. I can't bet against him. It's playoff Patrick Mahomes. It's hard for me to think that he can't win a game. So in what I'm looking at for this game, I think it's going to be close. I do think it's going to be 27, probably 27-24, probably a 3-point game, maybe even closer than that. But Kansas City is going to pull away and win at the end.
For me, it's almost like you're saying you can't bet against playoff Patrick Mahomes. For me, the way the Ravens are playing, they've done nothing for me to say, well, I can bet against them because they did this. There's nothing that they've done for me to do that. So, I mean, I have to pick the Ravens. They're the hottest team in football right now. And they're clicking when they need to be clicking. The offense has taken a while to progress and become what they are today, but that was expected with the new offensive play caller. You have new receivers coming in. It was going to always take some time. Plus, they dealt with a lot of offensive injuries early in the season, but you didn't want them to peak in October or November. You wanted them to peak right now, and that's what they're doing, where they got punched in the mouth in the first half against Houston at the end of that. They responded in a huge way with the halftime adjustments. So for me, Lamar Jackson, this is his first AFC Championship game. I'm sure maybe there'll be a couple of nerves, a couple of jitters here and there, but he is so locked in right now. Roquan Smith is so locked in. This whole Ravens team is so locked in right now. I think it's going to be really interesting. So I don't know. For me, I kind of have it around 28-23, something along those lines, but I still think a close game.
Yeah, the thing that is interesting to me, and the thing that I don't know, we're not going to know until the game kicks off, it's pressure. Who feels the pressure? Right now, I will tell you, I don't think the Chiefs and Mahomes or Andy Reid or Travis Kelce or anybody that plays on the Chiefs team really feel pressure. They weren't expected by most of the people in the NFL to be here where they are right now. They're playing with, league money, I guess, at this point. So I don't think they're going to feel pressure. The question is Lamar Jackson and are the Baltimore Ravens going to feel pressure hosting an AFC Championship game for the first time? Mahomes and company have been there. That could also be something that would be something that could turn the game if the Ravens come out and they're, a little bit slower getting started, I guess.
Yeah, and it is a key question. I think by the time the game is over, I think they'll just be settled in. Maybe at the very, very start, there'll be some of those nerves and jitters and everything like that. But again, they're just so locked in right now where you can talk about rest versus rust. That conversation's over because, the Ravens won their divisional playoff game. There's no more rust. They're the playoff game. They are now fully entrenched in the playoff mode. But I think when it comes to pressure, they've handled it well. I mean, they've passed every test that they've had to this season. The big Christmas game against the 49ers, coming off the bye against the Rams when they were down a couple of times. And to me, the Ravens are the test. Not, the Chiefs are the champs. Got to respect they're the champs. And I 100% do. But at least in terms of who's playing better right now, I just trust the Ravens a little bit more here. But I still respect the Chiefs, of course, enough to say that, one, they're the defending champions. And two, they're not going to make it easy because you're right. A game like this, Mahomes has been there before. Andy Reid has been there before. Travis Kelce's been there before. Like they all have, and while John Harbaugh has as well, for Lamar Jackson, for some of these other guys, they haven't. So it's a fair question, but I think, again, Baltimore's so locked in right now at the end of the day, I don't think it's necessarily going to matter as much, but I think by the end of the game, both teams will be playing fully locked in, and it won't be necessarily as big of a storyline as it would be at the beginning of the game. Chris is great and provided some great Chiefs insight, and obviously going to be a really good game here in the AFC Championship between the Ravens and the Chiefs. Sunday, 3 p.m., M&T Bank Stadium. Baltimore is absolutely buzzing right now. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens content, of course. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Also, be sure to follow along in audio form wherever you get your shows. Again, the same show, audio and video, so you're not missing out on any content. If you want to maybe watch one day, listen another, no content being missed. Stay tuned. A lot to get to. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.